In January, the river froze twice, then froze again, sealing the earlier ice inside new skin. The telegraph clicked at odd hours with messages no operator confessed to sending. Once, before dawn, the bell at First Methodist rang 3 times and stopped, leaving a hollow taste in the air like iron on the tongue. By week's end, 4 homes had draped their mirrors with cloth. In each house, a visitor had come and gone, soft-footed, polite. He had asked nothing but a memento, a hair ribbon, a handkerchief, a tooth loose enough to part with. Hartbridge had seen doctors before ambitious, men who stayed a month and left with cigar debt, but this one stayed. He put his hat on a peg in Mrs. Cobb's boarding house, and his black wagon slept in the ruined silversmith barn. And every evening a small light burned behind his window, until the hour the snow settled and the world stopped breathing. No one knew him. Everyone knew his name, Dr. Silas Brunn. The dead knew it, too, and when the ground refused the shovel, he taught the town another way to bury. Hartbridge lay as flat as a prayer sheet between 2 lines of cottonwoods. There were houses with green paint flaking off in curls, a depot that shuddered when the freight came through, and a single telegraph wire singing when the wind leaned on it. Men wore their grief like shirt sleeves. Women kept it folded with the linens. There was Sheriff Elijah Kane, who had never fired his pistol at anything but a coyote and preferred to write letters he never mailed. There was Mrs. Sarah Cobb, who ran the boarding house on Silver Street and could hear a man's character in the way he set down a cup. There was Thomas Mears, a miner whose lungs rattled in the damp and who walked the outskirts at night because he did not like to hear his children listening for his breath. There was Rev. Amos Willer, who kept his homily short in winter because the stove would not hold a flame, and Ephraim Dodd, undertaker and cabinet maker, who never looked at his line of infant coffins stacked like nested dolls. The glass in Dodd's windows rattled to the rhythm of the bell, whether it rang or not. On Tuesdays, Mrs. Cobb baked bread. On Wednesdays, Dodd wheeled sawdust to the alley. On Saturdays, a farmer named Hannah Pike sold eggs, and her hands were red and fissured in the cold. It was a town of habit, trying to make a treaty with a season that did not sign its name. The winter had been mean. Chest fever rode in from the south. Grip settled behind the eyes. Old wounds woke and remembered their work. Mothers wrapped children in quilts and warmed bricks at the stove to slip under the blankets. Sheriff Kane knocked on doors, not to arrest, but to check the temperature of a room with his palm held out, like a supplicant. The doctor already in residence, an earnest young man named Pell, had ridden off in December after a case went wrong and a father said more than he meant. The town did not chase Pell. The town did not chase anyone. It endured. So when the wagon came down the road, the color of a cloud that promised nothing, the people looked up, then looked away. In the manner of a place accustomed to bad luck arriving on time, he stepped down from the driver's board without sound, as if the snow had been laid for him alone. His coat was good. His boots were good. He took his hat off as you would in a church. He smelled faintly of clove and a chemical sweetness some recognized from their only trip to Dodd's back room. Dr. Silas Brunn did not smile, but his voice was kind as he asked if there were rooms and a place to stable his horse. Witness, statement Mrs. Sarah Cobb, boarding house ledger. January 6, 1899. Gentleman. Spare dark hair, eyes a light gray as if washed. Paid in advance. Carried a valise and a roll of oilcloth. Asked for a quiet room and boiling water. Hands fine surgeon's hands. Smelled of cloves and the bottle Dodd keeps for the hard cases. He ate little favoring broth. He mended the hinge on his door with scrupulous care. The first night, after the lamp was turned down, Mrs. Cobb heard him whispering a soft recitation in a language she did not know. Or perhaps no language at all, merely the cadence of someone rehearsing how to be a person. The next morning, he made his rounds. He did not ask for coin. He asked to sit a while with the sick and those too tired to keep living. He asked for water hot enough to steam the window. He asked, at the end, as softly as one asks a favor from a child, if the family might part with a thing the dying had loved, something small, something that had been near the final breath. Witness statement: Hannah Pike, Market Stall, January 10th. He took no pay. He said he was put here on charity, he said. He asked for my boy's handkerchief when the fever took him. I did not know what to do, so I gave it. The cloth was damp and he folded it like church linen. He kept a notebook he did not let anyone see. He kept midnight hours. He kept his hat on in the threshold, then took it off as if remembering a rule made by another man. On the third day, he visited Rev Willer's sister, who had coughed herself bloodless. He pressed her wrist and counted, then spoke to her as if teaching her the steps of a dance. Everyone knew but had forgotten when the cold set in. Excerpt: Rev Willer. Letter to colleague, found unsent. The physician's comfort was singular. He told Ruth, breathe in and think of the first day you felt the sun open the frost. Breathe out and set your name down in a place you can find again. He spoke to her like a teacher remonstrating a child for being late kindly, but firmly, as if he had somewhere to take her and did not wish to miss a train. When Ruth died, the doctor remained. He sat for an hour after the family had gone to boil water and find the good sheet. He folded Ruth's hands despite the stiffness, and when Ephraim Dodd arrived with his square shoulders and his smooth black case, the doctor was murmuring close to Ruth's ear. Dodd did not like that. But he said nothing. Undertakers are diplomats. They treat with both sides, living and dead, and take offense only when the living break protocol. By week's end, the town had learned the pattern. Where his lantern flashed in a window, the bell would ring within 3 days. Yet no one blamed him. The dying died without moaning. The pain did not rage so loudly. There was no blood in the wash basin the morning after he came. And he asked so little. A ribbon, a button, a baby's rattle. Each item he wrapped in clean cloth and marked with a number instead of a name. Sheriff Kane noticed he did not keep receipts, though he recorded the weather with inordinate care. North wind stable. Barometer falling. River skin renewed. He wrote the names of those he had visited with a fastidious hand, then drew a small line through the name if the person passed. Not a cross. Not a check. A small, polite line. The town gave him room. Men tipped hats. Women nodded. Children watched him pass and stopped their games because the air around him felt like a church on a weekday. In the silversmith barn, where the roof had fallen in the spring storm and no one had patched it, his wagon slept under tarpaulin with a small square of light, peering out from a hole as if the wagon had learned to keep an eye. And in the boarding house, the floorboards under his room began to knock, slow and patient. Whenever the clock struck the half hour, the first rumor did not begin with the doctor. It began with a cow, out past the cemetery, where the carrot tops poked black through the crusted snow. Hannah Pike found one of her milkers standing while dead, eyes glassed as if with lake ice. No blood, no sign of struggle. Just a stiffness that felt like reverence. Hannah was a practical woman. She cut the cow down and called it a loss, but she could not help noticing the prints near the animal. A man's boots. A ruler's edge in the snow where something had been measured, precise as a blueprint. That same day, the telegraph operator Mr. Lind received a wire from Kankakee and would not show it to anyone. He burned it in the stove. The telegraph key went on tapping long after the paper turned to ash. In town, Mrs. Cobb discovered that her silver locket, empty except for a strand of hair she could no longer name, had been removed from its cup on the sideboard and then returned. Polished, the clasp repaired. She asked Dr. Brunn whether he had seen anyone in the parlor. He bowed slightly and said, "Locks are only instructions to the living." It should have been comic. It was not. At night, the doctor walked. He did not crunch the snow. He did not leave breath hanging in the air. Where he went, dogs did not bark. He moved along the edges of the frozen fields like a boundary man taking stock. The town tolerated all this, because the pain abated in houses he visited. Men who would have thrashed against the sheets lay quiet. Women whose lungs rattled went still as if a lake had accepted a stone. The mercy of quiet is a strong medicine. The price seemed small. A ribbon, a button, a handkerchief. A memento. He has a way of patting the air as if smoothing down the sheet of the world. How sleep comes after. It is not a wicked sleep, but as if a long road is ending and there is a light the color of milk. He asked tonight whether I would part with the ribbon that held my sister's hair in the flood year. I said it is all I have. He said that is why it must go. On the 7th day, Thomas Mears followed him. Mears did not think of himself as a fearful man. He had stood in a shaft listening to the timbers speak before they came down. He knew the script of collapse. He knew a face when it was about to break. He did not know the doctor, and that was the itch he could not reach. The evening was a cut piece of glass. The moon sat on the horizon like a coin. Mears kept 2 fence posts between them and left his own footprints in the ditch so he could not be followed back. The doctor's lantern burned low, the flame a bead, out beyond the cemetery. Where the ground heaved in winter like a sleeping animal, the doctor stopped. He set his lantern down. Its light made a small yellow room in the snow. He lifted from his coat a thin metal rule and knelt. Mears, who measured planks for Dot in exchange for cash when the mine was slow, knew the posture of a man doing fractions. The doctor laid something in the snow. It gleamed like wet paper. He passed the ruler along it, marking with a pin. Mears did not breathe. The lantern flared. The doctor leaned close and whispered in a tone Mears recognized from the day his first child was born, the way a man speaks when he wants to be heard only by a single, necessary soul. The wind turned. The scent of cloves stepped aside, and Mears smelled something like the inside of Dot's case. Mears went home before the doctor stood. He let himself in without a sound. He set his boots by the door like 2 witnesses. He did not sleep. In the morning, his wife found the boots frozen upright. Mears was gone. The snow outside the house was as smooth as God's palm. Hartbridge said nothing. Hartbridge said very little, always. In places where the weather carries your secrets across fields, the only way to keep a thing is to bury it in your mouth. But the bell said what could not be said. 3 times across a sky the color of pewter dot on the 10th day. A letter came to Sheriff Kane, postmarked Bloomington, in a hand he did not recognize. He opened it with the blade he used for apples and read it twice. Then put it in the inside pocket of his coat, as if warming it might change the words. Letter to Sheriff Elijah Kane, received January 17, 1899. Sir, the man calling himself Silas Brunn practiced in Kankakee until he did not. He is learned. He is a collector. He claims to study the retention of soul through the preservation of the last and most personal effects. He was not brought to account, for no law knows how to name his habit. He believes the dying still have work to do, and that a tidy crossing requires instruction. Approach with caution, or better yet, do not approach at all. Kane did not share the letter. A sheriff in winter decides what the town can bear. He folded it again and again until the crease met itself, until the paper was a white seed he could have swallowed. He stood at the window of his office and watched the doctor pass, hat tilted against the weather, and thought that a man who does not show his teeth when he smiles might still be a good man. Might be. He visited Mrs. Cobb. He stood on her porch and listened to the house breathe. Floorboards spoke the language of wait in time. He knew it well. The room above the doctor's room was quiet, then softly not quiet, as if a child moved a chair by instructing it and not touching it. Sheriff's notebook. No causes yet. Keep the peace. Watch the barn. That night, he watched the barn. The silversmith barn had lost half its roof in the storm, when the corn ran horizontal and the lake stepped into the streets. The wagon under that roof wore its oilcloth like a soldier's greatcoat. The horse snuffed and pawed where the straw had frozen. Through the hole in the roof, stars appeared like pins holding up a black-sleeved Cane kept the dark as a companion and counted his breath to keep warm. Then the lantern moved in the wagon, no hand, just the lantern taking itself from hook to floor, where it burned small, then smaller, then almost gone. He did not move. He did not cry out. He let the dark arrive in full. In that dark, something rattled. A jar. A case? No, the sound was thinner, as if a button slid from string and tapped its neighbors. Cain had a memory then. A childhood winter. A sister sick. The soft sound of rosary beads moving under their mother's thumb when she thought the children slept. He had not thought of it in 20 years. The memory made him want to take off his hat, though he was alone. The lantern came back to its hook with no hand to carry it. The horse dozed. Cain's breath left him in one long thread like a stitch. He went home by the alley he used when drunk men needed the dignity of not being walked past the church. In the morning, Mrs. Cobb found an envelope under the doctor's plate at breakfast. Nothing inside but a clean white card with a single word written in a steady, schoolteacher's hand. Delivered. She asked him gently if he had forgotten to finish his note. He said he had not. He said he found words inclined to clutter the path. He folded the envelope twice, then again, until it could be palmed and made to disappear. Mrs. Cobb watched his hands and knew that he had been a surgeon, not because of the way he held a knife. He did not hold a knife, but because of the way he respected edges when he sat with the dying. He did not crowd the bed. He let the window know it could open if it wished. He warmed the basin and dipped his hand and touched the cloth to the hollow at the base of the throat, where breath rises when a person dreams. He kept records in his head, and when he set his valise down, it made no sound, as if the wood floor and the leather had made a treaty. People began to ask for him. Not out loud, not with the bell rope or the telegraph, but with the quiet signal of a lamp placed in a window at a precise slant. He saw the slant and turned his horse, and the horse did not complain. And the snow opened for the wheels because they had learned one another's names. Here. The question that arrives in every town where winter outlives the calendar: if the dying die softer, does it matter what price is paid? The town weighed the answer as it weighs everything on a scale none could see but all could feel. The measure tipped first one way, then the other. As the bell kept time, one mother said the doctor sang to her infant, low and tuneless, as if humming the shape of a cradle. One old man, Mr. Till, said the doctor sat by his bed and told him the itinerary for the long trip. "I will stand to your right, sir. I will hold the hand that does not tremble. When you forget your name, I will give you back the first syllable. When you do not know which foot to place first, I will place it for you, like ice over running water. And when you are across, I will seal the path so you cannot return by accident." Till died with a pleased expression, as if remembering a joke he had always meant to tell. The undertaker, Ephraim Dodd, began to find small parcels left in his workroom, folded cloth packages tied with cotton twine, each containing a piece of the dead carefully set aside, a curl of hair, a tooth, a scrap of ribbon cut cleanly to avoid fraying. Dodd, who had no wish to quarrel with the living or the dead, stored the parcels on a shelf and labeled them with dates. He did not ask for names. Names have heat. Dates keep cool. Objects appear without footstep or door sound. Marks of a measured hand at edges true. I have not seen the doctor carry any parcel in or out. It is a strange comfort to think that order is at work just beyond the reach of sight. The town began to move more slowly, and sometimes you could hear Through a cracked window at dusk, a voice murmuring to an empty room, as if practicing gratitude before someone worthy of it arrived. Still Thomas Mears was gone. His boots testified like two mute constables. And out past the cemetery, the snow held the print of a ruler's edge and something laid down at attention. Near the end of January. The sky lowered so close it brushed the chimneys, and the stovepipes hiccuped smoke back into rooms. The children were kept home from school because Rev Willer said the devil traveled better on a hard road and he would not lay out a path for him. The bell did not ring that week. It listened. Then, one evening, when the doctor had just come in from his rounds and hung his coat with its precise, almost loving gesture, one button aligned with a knothole, Mrs. Cobb took as a private joke, the floor beneath his room began its slow, patient knocking. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. As if a person practiced a sermon. As if a person counted a list. Mrs. Cobb stood at the base of the stairs and looked up the dark. "Is that you, doctor?" she called, and the knocking stopped, obedient as a child finger snap. A moment later, the doctor opened his door and looked down. His face was calm, his hair damp at the temples, his cuffs immaculate. "Nothing amiss," he said, as if the question had been a greeting. She asked if the boards were loose. He paused, considering whether that question belonged to the living or the dead. "Loose," he said finally, "is a word for things that have forgotten their work." He closed the door. The knocking began again, slow, considerate. That night, Sheriff Kane drew the letter from his pocket and brought it to the parsonage and laid it before Rev Willer. The minister read it, blinked as if snow had entered his eyes, and placed the paper on the stove where it lifted, pretended to leave, and then caught with a subdued sigh. He said nothing. Kane had hoped for the relief of a strong opinion. He received instead the heavier comfort of a shared burden. On his way home, Kane passed the silversmith barn. The lantern burned. The oilcloth on the wagon moved slightly, as if the wagon breathed. He thought, some men carry their churches with them. He thought, some men are churches other men should not enter. He kept walking. Wind stiffens. A bead of lantern light. In the morning. The telegraph tapped itself awake and sent a message no one claimed. Telegraph slip, unsigned. Delivered, delivered, delivered. Mr. Lynn swore the key moved under his hand, not by it. He swore the message did not travel the wire, but rose from the desk as heat rises from a coal before it dims. Toward dusk, the doctor knocked at Hannah Pike's door. Her second boy lay under quilts, lids fluttering like moth wings. The doctor stood at the foot of the bed and bowed his head. He asked what the child liked best in the world. Hannah said without shame, "Sweet milk," and the doctor nodded as if that were a sacrament he could dispense. He reached into his coat and drew out a bottle clear as winter glass with no label. Hannah's mouth opened on a question not yet born. He did not unstop the bottle. He held it near the boy's lips and whispered, "We do not know what he said. We know only that the boy's eyes quieted and the lids kept still, and his breath loosened its grip, and the room, which had been crouched like an animal about to run, stood up and went back to its work of holding the house together. The boy lived until morning. He died softly. Hannah kept the bottle after the doctor left. The cork had never been moved. The glass was dry as dust. Hannah Pike's note on flour sack. He teaches them. He teaches them how not to be afraid of forgetting. After that, people began to speak to their dead as if the dead might be practicing something difficult in the next room. The town grew quiet in a new way, and the quiet had a texture, like cloth laid over a mirror. They started to wonder not if the doctor was wicked, but what he was finishing that someone else had begun. On the last night of January, a fog came up from the river and brought its own frost with it. The town became a set of floating lamps, each house a ship. The church bell rang once no hour, just a single sound like a spoon against a glass. Then, After a full minute in which nothing breathed, it rang again. Then a third time, from nowhere and everywhere. Dogs did not answer. The telegraph paused its tapping, as if it feared to speak over a voice older and more certain than its own. In the morning, a small parcel lay on the step of the sheriff's office. Cotton twine. Square knot. Inside, a white card with the sheriff's name in an even, schoolteacher's hand and a lock of hair, the exact color of the river when it turns in spring. He turned the card over. On the back, a single line. For your pocket, when you forget you began on the far bank. And Hartbridge understood that some visitors do not come to cure, but to collect what the living cannot keep.